So good morning.
Good morning.
Better than that, come on. Good morning.
Good morning.
Better. I'm Evelyn Murphy, and I am going to be your MC for the next couple hours. And I must say that over my lifetime, which is now quite a few decades, on rare occasion, and never by design, I have found myself at the right place at the right time. And I have to say to all of us today, together, we are here today at the right place at the right time. We have an agenda today that's going to knock your socks off. In the wake of a disastrous election, this agenda is going to pick us up and dust us off and let us lock arms and barrel ahead. That's what today is all about. And I want you to think about it for a minute. So here's what we're going to be doing. We have in Dr. Mary Frances Berry, we have a living legend as our keynote today. And then we are followed up by Senator Elizabeth Warren, who is also no shrinking violet when it comes to social and economic justice. And then we have all of us with our panels and the policies and the substance of what it is that's going to take us to economic security for every woman in New England and her family. That's today. We couldn't be luckier if we had planned this, to be coming together and to be able to be here together and to get our force so that we walk out of here with the strength and the conviction that we need and that we're going to have. So here's Gloria Steinem, the great Gloria Steinem. Several days after the election, Gloria Steinem wrote in The Guardian, she said, "Real change, like a tree, grows from the bottom up, not from the top down." Our group today, our alliance here, is the tree with the roots that we've been putting together for a long time. We've been here before. Many of us have been here the last time 2 years ago. We're back again 3 years later. We have intertwined the roots of this tree that connect our policies with our activism, with now a philanthropic financial support as well as government. Those are deep, powerful roots on which we are now about to build even more in our activism. Your charge today, our charge together, is to walk out of here with our arms locked together and barreling forward to make sure that we achieve economic security for every woman in New England and her families. And to do that, we need to continue to connect the local and the regional forces together. We have built that in a way that is very powerful. We need to continue that local and regional action. We need to continue to do the cross-sector connections between the public and the private sectors. And we need an intergenerational connection that learns from each other. For the young women who are here today, for those of you who may have voted for the first time or several times, learn from some of us older folks. Because I have to tell you, as bad as this election is, I thought when Nixon was elected, it was horrible as well. I could not believe that in the face of the civil rights riots and the protests on the war in Vietnam and the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King and the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, that we could elect Richard Nixon. But we did. And I could not believe after that some other presidents that have followed along. But what I've learned is you just keep going. We cannot give up. I would ask the younger women in this room to learn from us older folks what we've done right and wrong so that you don't repeat those mistakes and that you take our successes forward with even more power. And I would ask the older women in this room to learn from the younger women what it takes with the new technologies and the new ways of communicating and the new kinds of styles of organizing and activism what we learned from you, how to make you even better and stronger. That's the intergenerational connection that we need to build going out of here today. So don't underestimate for 1 minute what we can do today, because it's very exciting. It is that force. It's that tough New England force. And we've all got it. So let us go ahead today and show New England and be a model for the nation as well and how we do this. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Keith Motley, the Chancellor of the University of Massachusetts, the Boston campus. Keith has been the Chancellor for 10 years, and he is in charge of this strategic initiative for the university. You can see what's happening as you go on campus in terms of the enormous amount of physical growth that is happening. It is Keith's charge to enhance the academic offerings, to build the structure here, to enhance the research, to increase the enrollment, to make this university a resource for knowledge and a resource for public involvement and public service. Those are huge responsibilities. Those huge responsibilities are matched by his imposing size and his huge personality and his huge presence. So it is my pleasure to ask you to welcome Chancellor Keith Motley.
Thank you. So you know, every now and then you find yourself in the right place. And this morning I know that I'm in the right place. First of all, let me get this out the way. Good morning to every single one of you. For anyone that I haven't had a chance that's looking at me, cussing me out right now because I haven't said hello this morning, my mentors that are here, all of my former students that are here, all of my friends that are around this room, good morning. I am glad you had a problem getting here this morning. Welcome to your university, the University of Massachusetts Boston, that one that is sitting here waiting for you, and it just, all those things that our great Evelyn Murphy said about us, we never want to forget our true mission, which is to serve, 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 and serve. But in doing that, never forgetting to always be that place that's accessible, that is far-reaching in its scholarship, its research, in its contributions. And I'm just so grateful that we can continue to build on the legacy that you started a couple years ago here with us. And I'm so grateful that you gave us the kind of plan to move forward. This Commonwealth's capital city, Urban Public Research University appreciates you. We understand what it means to be the only public in a great sea of private institutions. I'm a product of those institutions, but I'm also someone who was taught a long time ago the value of giving, learning, teaching, serving, and all those things. And Bookman, and Bookman, and Bookman. So I've been at a lot of airports lately, and I've been at a lot of places speaking, you know, and folk come up to me claiming Ann Bookman, wanting me to know that long before she was here, she had a life, and that they were part of that life. So you might claim her now, but remember, we shaped her and we were working with her long before you got wise enough to hire her as the person to do your wonderful center here on campus. Thank you so much. So I'm going to start with lots of thank yous. First, I want to thank the McCormick Graduate School Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy for their leadership in founding the New England Women's Policy Initiative, of which this conference is just a small part. Lots of work contributing every day. We're so grateful for that. It's an innovative new project. It's about galvanizing people across our region, but also coordinating their actions on behalf of the economic justice for women and their families. Today, our campus community welcomes so many women leaders who are determined to help shape our society in positive ways. And that's each and every one of you. So I'm so pleased that we started out with someone who's not new to this campus. See, I didn't have to roll Evelyn Murphy out and say, oh, Evelyn, would you please come do this for us? She's been here long before I thought about coming over here, supporting and working on these issues. We're grateful that she served as this Commonwealth's Lieutenant Governor, but she's always been a scholar. She's always been someone who's been forward-thinking. She's always been somebody that modeled excellence and service, and I've always appreciated her from afar, but to get to know her over, see, she says I've been Chancellor for 10 years, but some of you all know that I went on a journey that I've been here 13 years, and 2 of those years I spent financing this system and their money. And so, Evelyn, thank you so much. Your work as a grassroots activist, the national organization that you've done around wage, and we're just so grateful that you have just been tremendously excellent as someone who's been a part of this whole process with us. You continue to stand up for working women, and that's something that we want to model. That excellence matters. Let's give her a round of applause. I'm always reminded that she's also a board member of our Women in Politics and Public Policy Center, and we're grateful for that too. I want to thank our keynote speaker. Now, I was bragging about her to some folk, and I was telling them, you know, I was going to have the incredible Dr. Mary Frances Berry here. And in another life, when I was dean of the African American Institute at some place on Huntington Avenue, this was my go-to person for scholarship around the things that people used to talk about but couldn't put context to. But I was bragging about it to one of my assistants to the Chancellor this morning. And he looked at me with his chest all poked out, and he said, I was at Dartmouth College, and I felt lonely back in like 1981, Chancellor. And Dr. Berry came to my political sociology class. She changed my life because I knew I was kind of a scholar, but I didn't understand what that actually meant. I was sulking because I felt lonely, and she came in and modeled excellence in a manner that changed my life. And so Steve Neville wanted me to tell you, Dr. Berry, thank you. Okay, I know he's running around somewhere here because they all do that to try to get me out of here, to go somewhere else. So he'll be trying to come in a minute to do that. Your work serving as chairperson of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission led the charge for equal rights and liberties for all Americans. And you did that over the course of 4 presidential administrations. Some of us remember that work a while ago with the Reagan administration. Allison Quirk, thank you as well. I have to talk about you because you know one of our partners is State Street Corporation. Thank you. We want to extend a warm welcome to you. You are an expert on diversity, inclusion, and talent management, but you're responsible for all aspects of that globally for State Street. We're glad to be partners with you, and thank you for joining us today to share your insights. It's an honor for me to welcome the members of our Conference Planning Committee. Without you and your support of what we do, then we wouldn't have the momentum and be able to continue in the way that we have around this work. Thank you for representing women's commissions and women's funds from across New England. Thank you for your work to create this important gathering. Thanks to all of our speakers that are here today. You bring diverse skills and diverse backgrounds. We have speakers from all 6 New England states. We didn't just keep it, as someone says that I try to do within the Commonwealth, Boston-centric. We've spread it out. But we do have a dose of University of Massachusetts Boston faculty for you too, and people. So thank you all. Kristin Smith, thank you for coming down from the University of New Hampshire to work with us. Lastly, I want to point out how happy I am to welcome you as an audience again. Today, close to 400 people from all over New England came out to participate in this event. So my son was sort of surprised that his father was trying to be on time this morning. Dad, why are you in such a hurry? I'm like, man, don't you know I am not going to mess this program up and be like 15 minutes. I'm already trying to sneak a keynote speech in because I get so excited and then my mouth sort of connects to that excitement. However, it's just a pleasure to invite you to this beautiful waterfront campus. Now, some people see ski slopes that don't have snow and things like that right now. What we see is opportunity, and the opportunity to do things just like this. Your engagement and participation matters as we explore topics that continue to impact women. We are about to delve into and discuss key policy issues detailed in the call of action. Now, the call of action connects the last time we were together. Some of you, don't worry about not having been here before. We're going to catch you up. Wages and income security, family and medical leave, workforce development and job training, early care and education, and elder care. We're so grateful that this conference produced those points of emphasis coming forward. These issues are vitally important, as you know, and I would argue that they're related to the American dream. Countless politicians continue to emphasize, both in the past and in the present, that everyone in our country deserves a fair shot at the American dream. If we want to achieve the American dream, this dream has to be more than just a nightmare for some at some times. More women need to have economic security. Improving economic security is a critical issue that we cannot afford to ignore. Women make up most of the United States labor force, as you know. They hold 52% of all our professional level jobs, yet only 4.2%, as the great Evelyn Murphy says, of the Fortune 500 CEOs, and less than 20% of the congressional members are women. 40% in the United States are breadwinners. Many of them earn just as much or more than their partners, or provide the only income for their families, but yet they're still earning 77 cents on the dollar. This glaring gap is something that we are all focused on. And so for women to achieve the American dream and be empowered, their rights need to be strengthened. Our women entrepreneurs, leaders, managers, engineers, teachers, administrators, designers, and factory workers deserve to be supported in their workplaces no matter what their age is. And so I'm excited about today. I hope that you find today's conference engaging, fulfilling. Thank you for your support and your participation, and don't worry, we will get you back to wherever you parked at the end of the day. Some of y'all have been saying, I can't believe it, Chancellor. Where and how do I get back? We got you. Focus on this, and we'll focus on that, okay? Have an incredible day.
That's our Chancellor. You see in the program that this conference is the result of a collaboration of many groups, as the Chancellor just mentioned. But one person is the glue and is the motivator, the leader, or in her terms, the coordinator, and that is, of course, Bookman. she brought, as the Chancellor said, an incredible record of research and scholarly activism, and actually involved at the highest levels of the federal government when she was the head of policy and research for the Women's Bureau of the Department of Labor. So Anne has this extensive research and leadership and activism herself. But when she came to become the the director of the Center for Women in Policy, in Politics and Public Policy, she turned to our board and she said, we're going to do the strategic plan. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but I've sat through a lot of strategic plans, and they are dead once we do them, but not Anne's. She actually says what she's going to do, and then she does what she says she's going to do. And one of the elements of that strategic plan was to build this New England alliance of policy and activism. That was in the plan. And that's why we're here today. What makes Anne Bookman a gem, in my mind, and why all of us follow her, even many of us who are used to sort of getting out and taking the lead, is not just her research skills and her experience and her wisdom in that regard, and not just her extraordinary work ethic, which is hard to match, but it's her integrity and her heart. And they shine through in everything she does, including today. So please welcome and say a huge thank you to Anne Bookman.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. You have to do it 3 times. So, I am just so thrilled to see all of you. We've been working towards this day for months, years, and to see all of you together, to see all of your faces, and to know a number of you, and to know the incredible leadership that you're providing in your workplaces, in your communities, through various organizations is just profoundly exciting. So I want to just start with a few thank yous of my own. I want to welcome you on behalf of the Planning Committee. This is certainly not an effort of mine or even our centers. This is an effort truly of an amazing regional group of women leaders and one man. We have 9 organizations. They're listed on the front of your program book. I want to just ask, first of all, the co-chair of the Planning Committee, my colleague and very close friend, Denise Schultz, who is Director of Operations and Outreach for the Center, to take a stand as the co-chair. Denise is the heart and the soul and has put in countless hours. I would also just like the Planning Committee members to all stand now so we can all thank them publicly. I can't name everybody, but they're an amazing group. Thank you all. I also want to thank our corporate and foundation sponsors. You saw their names on the screen when you came in. Their financial contribution has made it possible for some women to be here who couldn't afford to buy a ticket. They helped us create discount tickets and complimentary tickets, and without their support, we all wouldn't be together. So we thank them. I also want to thank our collaborating partners. These are nonprofit organizations that we work with all the time, and there are 30 of them here today. So I really want to thank you for your partnership. And if you are from one of the collaborating partner organizations, please stand. I also want to thank the board. As you heard, I'm very, very lucky to have Evelyn Murphy as a member of the board. She is truly probably my most important mentor and friend, and contributes enormously to the direction of the center. I also want to thank the chair and vice chair of the board, Digna Scott, who's actually on an airplane from South Africa at the moment. But we do have our vice chair, Charlotte Golar-Ritchie. And I want to ask Charlotte and all the members of the board, both present and emeritus, who are here, because I know they're both. Could you stand so people can recognize you? I also want to thank other members of the staff of the center. You've met Denise, but I would also like to ask Krista Kelleher, who is our Research and Policy Director, to stand. Muna Killingback, who is the Assistant Director of our Graduate Certificate Program on Gender Leadership and Public Policy. She's in the back over there. And a number of our alumni and current students are here, which is fabulous. Ann Foreman, who is also in the back, our alumni coordinator. And Jessie A. Zong. Is Jessie here? I'm not sure she's here. She's one of our research assistants. Oh, okay, there she is. Great. Welcome, Jessie. So the last thank you just goes again to all of you taking the time to come and share your wisdom, your expertise. Some of you have traveled from far corners of Maine, as well as Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and the western part of Massachusetts. And I just can't thank, sorry? Oh, sorry. I just want to thank you all for attending today and contributing. So I want to move on to the conference theme, which, as you know, is ensuring economic security for all women and their families. And this is a theme that we discussed and tested at our first biennial conference 2 years ago. I think what's important to stress is how it focuses on the challenge of inequality and the sources of inequality, that there's an ongoing effect of the Great Recession. There's persistent poverty, there's low-wage work, there's lack of support for families. This is part of what we're talking about when we talk about trying to ensure economic security. And we're also talking about expanding opportunity. And this includes public policies, public and private partnerships, and voluntary employer policies. When we use the word policy, we use a small p, because we think it is really going to take a cross-sector effort to get the kind of change that we need. So this is a kind of a special moment in the history of this region and the nation, and Evelyn has already alluded to it. I think that for women and communities of color and other groups that have been marginalized and whose voices we don't often hear, this is a moment of both challenge and opportunity. It's not, as Evelyn has reminded us, the first time we've faced challenges, but I would say that the challenges we're facing now are pretty significant. But it also means that our opportunities are huge to work together and to really create the change that we all know is needed. We've heard a lot about divisions, but where do divisions come from? I think they're really rooted in inequality, particularly of class, of socioeconomic status. The wealth gap that we hear so much about has created deep class divides, which are tearing at the fabric of our society and democracy. And at the same time, there's a lack of equality for women, for African Americans, Latinos, other communities of color, lack of equality for immigrants, people of diverse faiths, and sexual orientations. All of these inequalities must be addressed, and that's part of our work today. So let me move on and just say a few words about our conference goals. I think part of what we want to do today that you've heard about already is really to bring together diverse stakeholders. We know not everybody in this room agrees. They're not all of the same opinion, but we want to promote dialogue among all of you because we feel that you all have similar commitments and share those with our center. We want to try to build consensus on a regional policy agenda. We are also here to create a learning community We each have things to learn, and we each have things to teach, and let's not forget that. Let's share data on best practices and build the most successful and impactful campaigns around our policy priorities as we possibly can. And I think part of the way that we're going to do that is to maximize our impact through coordinated action and strategies across the region. There are many here who are leaders in their states, and they're doing amazing things in their states. But I think that we really need to bump it up a notch because of these challenges that I spoke of before. We need to create a united policy agenda for the New England region. We need to make this region a model for the country of showing how localities and states and regions can work together. I know we can do it. In terms of our call to action and our policy priorities, I won't repeat them again. They're on the screen, and the Chancellor was good enough to go through them. I just want to remind you that in the 2014 conference, this call to action document was a draft. It was a proposal. And many of you sat at round tables like this and workshopped this document and gave us input and feedback, and we revised it. And so the call to action that we have today is really our collective call to action. It's all of our ideas, and we need to figure out how to make those ideas a reality. So I want to end by turning to some of the research that we prepared for this conference. I think one of the hallmarks of our center and of the New England Women's Policy Initiative more broadly is that we don't just go for policies because we think they're good ideas. We study the matter. We collect data. And we have prepared two publications for this conference that you'll find in your packets. One is called Recovery for All with a question mark, a snapshot of women's economic status in New England. This was co-authored with Krista Kelleher and Kristin Smith, who I'll be introducing in a moment. I have a feeling that you can tell by the question mark on the title that we think maybe the recovery hasn't happened for everybody, and we've tried to document that. And also in your packet, you will find a policy snapshot. This is a summary of where we are in the 6 New England states on public policies in our call to action that we feel will be particularly impactful in terms of ensuring women's economic security. And part of what we argue in our publication is that we think we should stop taking a piecemeal approach to these policies. We think we need to talk about these policies together, to put together a package of policies that will actually create livable wages and high-quality jobs for all women and for all families. So it's now time to just say a little bit about what we hope you'll do today, and then I'm going to introduce Kristin. I think our work today is really in the 5 tracks. That's where we're going to build this agenda that I've been speaking of and design effective strategies. As I said before, I think the time for state and local action is here. This is our time. We don't know what's going to happen on the federal level. We just don't know. Some of us are scared, but we don't know. But we do know, and it is in our control to form movements and build coalitions on the state and local level and really move forward. Given the attacks on women, people of color, immigrants, LGBT people, Muslims, and others, I think we need nothing less than a new civil rights movement for the 21st century. The first civil rights movement always combined economic justice with civil rights for people being marginalized and discriminated against, and we have to do that again. As Dr. Martin Luther King said, the arc of justice is long, but it bends towards justice. Let us commit ourselves to a multi-issue economic justice agenda. We must do it, we can do it together. So it is now my great pleasure to introduce Kristin Smith, as I said, one of Krista's and my co-authors on our report. Kristin is a research associate professor of sociology and a family demographer, and she's based at the Carsey School of Public Policy at the University of New Hampshire. Her research focuses on family demography, work and family economic sociology, gender inequality, and public policy. And she serves as co-editor of Economic Restructuring and Family Well-Being in Rural America. She has been studying that rural America that we've heard so much about recently. Her research has been published in numerous academic journals, and she is also often called on by the media, such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, and others. So I'm very pleased to welcome my collaborator and colleague, Kristin Smith.
Thank you, Anne. So I'm so pleased to be here today to share the research findings from our collaborative work that's being presented and released today. As Anne mentioned, our publication is called Recovery for All, ? A snapshot of women's economic status in New England. And this is collaborative work, as Anne has mentioned already. So we've all heard the good news that America is now in recovery from the Great Recession. Earnings are up, the stock market has rebounded, even poverty has declined. In this report, we dig deeper and ask, how significant has the recovery been? And who has truly recovered? This report looks at the economic status of women in each New England state and in the region as a whole during the pre-recession years that we designate as 2006 and 2007, and the post-recession years, 2011 through 2014. And we look at American Community Survey data. We also look at women who are often invisible in the news stories and missing from the narrative. We find some good news, and we find some bad news. We highlight 4 key policies that are at play in New England states, including the minimum wage, pay equity, paid sick days, and paid family and medical leave. This is building on what Anne has just explained in the call to action. We focus in the publication on these 4 policies. So now for some data. Here's the good news. Women's annual earnings have increased in all but one New England state, Rhode Island, from 2006 to 2014, which is the data that we look at in this publication. But we did look at the 2015 ACS data, the American Community Survey, and we found that there was an increase in women's earnings from 2014 to 2015 in all 6 New England states, including Rhode Island. So that's the good news. Earnings are up for women in the New England states. This slide here shows variation by state. As you can see, earnings are highest in Connecticut and Massachusetts, the 2 lines at the top. Lowest in Maine, the line in green at the bottom. And earnings in New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont fall in between. We also can see from this slide that 5 of the 6 states have higher median earnings than U.S. women overall, and that is designated by the gray dashed line on the slide. So that's the good news. But as I foretold, there is also some bad news. The gender wage gap persists post-recession, despite a higher pace of growth in women's earnings than in men's earnings. We find that the gap in earnings between men and women working full-time year-round decreased in 4 states: Maine, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. but it still remains sizable. You probably all know that the wage gap disproportionately affects minority women. When we look at the data, we see a very large wage gap between minority women and white men across all New England states. In fact, in New England as a whole, minority women earned 62% of white men's earnings in both pre-recession and post-recession time periods. 62%. So we dig deeper into the minority wage gap because we believe it is a large contributor to the gender wage gap as a whole. Okay, so there's a lot going on in this slide, and just bear with me, and I will walk you through it and explain all the different pieces. So this slide shows the earnings gap between minority women and white women, another important measure of wage inequality. So first, across the slide, you see that the blue bars, which are representing minority women's earnings, are lower than the red bars, which represents white women's earnings, across the entire slide. This is true across all states in both pre- and post-recession times. Clearly, white women earn more than minority women in the New England states. What else is going on in this slide? Well, if you compare the blue lines for one state, for example, let's take a look at Maine, which is on the very left side of the slide, you see that post-recession earnings are higher for minority women than during pre-recession times. That indicates that minority women's earnings went up over the time period studied. You could also compare the red lines, the red bars, to decipher the change in earnings for white women. Finally, the circle in the middle of the bars shows minority women's earnings as percent of white women's earnings, first in the pre-recession and then in post-recession by state. So for example, in Maine, in the pre-recession, minority women earned 80% of white women's earnings. Okay, now that you understand this table or this figure, what does it all mean? Does the disparity in minority women's earnings compared with white women's earnings increase or decrease from pre to post-recession? The states on the left side of the figure show a narrowing of the minority to white women's wage gap as the percent of minority women's earnings to white women's earnings went up. So we see a smaller gap between the two bars. In Massachusetts, viewed in the middle of the figure, the minority to white earnings gap remained the same at 76%. Finally, the minority to white earnings ratio decreased in two states where minority women's earnings growth did not keep pace with white women's earnings growth. So we have three stories of what has happened in the New England states as viewed on this slide. There's a lot to take in on this slide, but it's an important measure of inequality that is often overlooked. Unfortunately, right now, I can't take questions on the data, but I am very happy to work with any of you and answer any questions that you have during the break, during any of the times in the afternoon, or if people have questions and want to send me an email, I'm happy to talk with people about the data. So moving on into delving deeper into the data in our report, we see more bad news, particularly when we look at low-wage workers post-recession. About 30% of women are making $20,000 annually or less in the post-recession. 30%, almost one-third. This averages out to $10 an hour if you work 40 hours a week for 50 weeks per year. In all the New England states, except for Maine, this proportion increased over the recession. This is important because while earnings have generally increased for all women, the proportion of women with low earnings has also increased, providing evidence of increasing wage inequality in New England. In order to understand more about the changes in occupations that are female-dominated and minority-dominated, we selected 3 occupations to examine in our report. Among important findings is that we found decreasing earnings among female direct care workers and retail workers from the pre-recession time period to the post-recession time period. So our report shows a sobering view of economic status of women in New Hampshire. Yes, there has been a rise in women's earnings, but the rosy-colored glasses don't extend to minority women and low-wage women. But I want to end on a positive note. There has been some good news from this election. Gains were made in 2 of the policy issues that we highlight in our report. Minimum wage initiatives passed in Maine, go Maine, and Arizona and Colorado. And paid sick time initiatives passed in Arizona and Washington. So momentum is building in the New England region for these policy issues. And we can learn from each other today to move things forward. We hope you find these data and the policy recommendations useful for your work in your state, and we hope you read this report. And again, we look forward to working with you as you work forward with your work. Thank you.